3, 2, 1. And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Pro Wrestle Machine. We are streaming today from the studio. The big guy is manning the chat and the other controls. Make sure to hit the like, follow, subscribe buttons wherever you see them. Okay, let's dive in. July 6, 1992 Observer Newsletter. Buddy Rogers obituary. WCW Beach Blast sets record. And tons more. By Observer staff. July 6, 1992. One of pro wrestling's all-time biggest drawing cards and arguably the most successful drawing heel in history, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, passed away late Friday night at the age of 71 in a Fort Lauderdale, Florida hospital. Rogers, who appeared to be the picture of health to the end, had suffered 2 strokes over the previous 10 days. The first was a mild one. The second, on Monday, June 22, left him blind and paralyzed on one side of the body. He eventually lapsed into a coma and was on life support systems by Wednesday and officially passed away Friday night at approximately 11 p.m. Eastern Time in Holy Cross Hospital. His funeral was scheduled for Tuesday in Fort Lauderdale, and the family asked that donations in his name be made to the Stroke Foundation. Rogers, born Herman Road in Camden, New Jersey, although he later legally changed his name to Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, innovated and popularized many of the most enduring concepts of today's pro wrestling. While not the first bleached blonde villain, Gorgeous George popularized that concept a few years earlier on national television. He was the first arrogant strutting blonde with serious heel heat. He was the first hardcore heel world champion. There had been subtle heel champions before, popularized the figure 4 leg lock, then called the figure 4 grapevine, and popularized many aspects of working a match that are still being used today. Rogers is generally considered the most enduring box office draw throughout North America from the period of 1948-63. Some, like Gorgeous George, were bigger draws for a short period of time, while others, like Argentina Rocca, were bigger draws on a more regional basis, and the first of the great workers by modern standards, and was right in the middle of a sensitive political period which led to the formation of the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, today's WWF. In addition, his working style in the ring is generally considered the forerunner to 2 of the other greatest workers in the world during their time period, Ray Stevens in the 1960s and Ric Flair during the 1980s. While not considered as a shooter, Rogers was generally considered, and grudgingly so by many since he was not a popular performer in his prime, as the best worker of the 1950s. Much of Flair's mannerisms in the ring, from the hair, the attitude, the robes, the tan, the begging off while in trouble down to the Nature Boy moniker and the figure 4, were modern adaptations of concepts Rogers popularized. During his prime, Rogers was considered one of the most hated men in the business, not only by fans, but also by promoters, since he was considered tough to do business with, and even by his fellow wrestlers, since he had a reputation as being a bully in the ring to the point of sometimes hurting those who weren't his physical equals, but working a different style against the wrestlers with reputations for toughness. As the years passed, his image completely changed to being one of the nicest and most respected of the old-timers, and held in the highest esteem for maintaining his remarkable physical condition. In recent years, Rogers, whose career as a headliner was cut short by a 1963 heart attack, had attracted national publicity first for his remarkable physique for his age in an Esquire magazine article just 3 years ago, then for his punching out a bigger 29-year-old during a brawl in a sandwich shop, and this past January, for attempting to become the second man to wrestle professionally in 7 decades, as being the first, by agreeing to a match with Buddy Landel on a card promoted by Joel Goodhart in Philadelphia. The latter match never took place, as Goodhart's promotion folded just days before the match, which was said to have had a strong advance. Rogers started wrestling in 1939 while working as a police officer in New Jersey as Dutch Road, but took the name of Nature Boy Buddy Rogers early in his career in Texas. Buddy Rogers was a futuristic character popular in 1940s science fiction, while Nature Boy was a hit song during that same time period. Rogers was one of the biggest names in the business during the first television boom period of the late 1940s and early 1950s, when pro wrestling was on national television from the Chicago-based Dumont Network. In later years, when the business was struggling after being ravaged by television overexposure, those who don't study history are doomed to repeat its mistakes. Rogers, working out of Columbus, Ohio from promoter Al Haft, was generally considered the top drawing card nationally. Working in the Midwest as United States champion, Rogers was part of the revitalization of wrestling's popularity in that part of the country, particularly in Chicago, where his main event matches sold out the International Amphitheater's 11,000 seats every other Friday night. After running through all competition, Rogers faced the Ultimate Babyface, the National Wrestling Alliance World Heavyweight Champion Pat O'Connor, who was then well known as living in the Chicago suburb of Glenview himself, in what is still, to this day, the biggest drawing NWA World title match in history, and depending upon what the real paid attendance for WrestleMania was in Indianapolis this past year, either the second or third largest paid crowd to see pro wrestling ever in the United States. The match, on June 30, 1961 at Comiskey Park in Chicago, which drew 38,622 fans, a record that stood until 1987, and a $148,000 house, an American record which itself lasted nearly 2 decades, saw Rogers win 2 of 3 falls to become world champion in one of the most famous matches in pro wrestling history. A rematch between the two several months later at Comiskey Park, where Rogers retained the title, drew about 30,000 fans. From the period from the end of World War II until 1962 or 1963, nobody in the business was bigger than him, although Lou Thesz might dispute that, said one longtime veteran of the business, and even Thesz himself, who was well known for not getting along with Rogers because of a smart aleck remark Rogers made about Thesz' teacher and longtime friend Strangler Lewis early in his career, admitted Rogers as being the top worker of the era. He wasn't a wrestler, shooter, said Thesz, who mended fences so to speak with Rogers in recent years, and the two became friends after getting together at the Cauliflower Alley Club banquets and at last summer's wrestling convention in New York, after decades of dislike between them. But he knew how to work, and he knew how to draw money, and he knew how to book. When you draw money, everyone will deal with you even when they don't like you, because there really are so few who can really draw money. He was the top performer of my time in a class by himself. He could do a lot of things that the rest of the guys wouldn't even try. Thesz credited Rogers for the promotional success of 2 of the most famous promoters of the era, Eddie Quinn in Montreal and Sam Muchnick in St. Louis. Muchnick, after World War II, ran opposition to Martin Thesz, Lou's father, in St. Louis. At the time, the Thesz promotion was regularly drawing 10,000 per show, while Muchnick's shows were struggling to draw 2,000 to 4,000. When Muchnick brought Rogers in, it resulted in his first sellout ever, in 1949 against Don Eagle, and it wasn't long before the two groups merged, with Muchnick running the promotion and Lou Thesz as NWA champion. He was barely surviving, Thesz remembered, but when Al Haft gave him Buddy, he turned it around. While Rogers as champion meant big box office, it was probably the most controversial championship reign in the history of the NWA, and eventually was responsible for the formation of the WWF. Wrestling lore has it that Toots Mondt attempted to gain another stranglehold on the business. Mondt, a legendary shooter/promoter, was part of the famous Trust threesome with Strangler Lewis and Billy Sandow that was the first group to control pro wrestling nationally during the 1920s. Mondt was at the time promoting in the Northeast as a partner with, among others, Vince McMahon Sr. At the time, the most prestigious power in the sport was gaining control of the NWA Championship, held by Rogers, who was his man. Mondt is generally given credit or blamed, depending upon how you want to put it, for this series of events, not McMahon, although ultimately McMahon, who later aced out Mondt for full control of the northeastern cities, was the ultimate beneficiary in the formation of the WWF. Rogers became more and more difficult to book by promoters outside the Northeast, and a few strange incidents happened during his reign. The first, on August 31, 1962, was in a dressing room in Columbus, Ohio, when Carl Gotch and Bill Miller, 2 of the legendary tough guys of the business during that time, caught Rogers in the dressing room and smashed his hand, which caused him to miss several big-money title defenses. The incident apparently occurred when Gotch challenged Rogers, who doubled as the booker for Al Haft's crew at the time, to a fight. Rogers headed for the door, and as he tried to get out, Miller slammed it on him. Not long after he returned, on November 21, 1962, in Montreal, Rogers had a title defense against Killer Kowalski, which wound up with Rogers getting his ankle broken in the first minute of the match, getting pinned for the first fall, and obviously not wrestling second fall. After much controversy, since Kowalski wasn't supposed to win the title, the NWA tried to save face by making a ruling that since it was a 2 out of 3 fall match, and since Kowalski only won 1 fall, that Rogers was still recognized as champion. Finally, the NWA-WWF split occurred when Rogers returned to action. Rogers was scheduled to defend the title the next day against Lou Thesz in Houston. Thesz, at the time in semi-retirement, was brought back by the NWA to win the title from Rogers, and Rogers missed their first 2 meetings due to the aforementioned circumstances. Thesz' dislike for Rogers was well known, and that Thesz would never do a job for Rogers, and never did. One time Eddie Quinn in Montreal wanted Thesz to put Rogers over and was whining and dining him, and Thesz remarked that there isn't enough whiskey in Canada to get me to put Rogers over. Finally, just before the Toronto match scheduled for January 24, 1963, Muchnick, who was the leading power behind the NWA at the time, and who had Rogers' $25,000 bond that the champion had to place before getting the belt, to ensure them either doing the job when the time came or not running off with the title, told Rogers that if he no-showed the match, that Muchnick was going to release his bond and give it all to charity. Rogers did the job for Thesz, But legend has it the match was made one fall specifically so if Rogers wasn't cooperative that Thez would take him out. When he lost the NWA title, the Northeastern promoters who controlled Rogers and didn't want him to lose the title, pulled out of the NWA and formed the WWF, with Rogers as the first champion. With the exception of Flair, he's the only man to hold both the NWA and WWF, now WWF, titles. Rogers suffered a heart attack shortly thereafter, but as soon as he could return, came back for a series of 2-minute matches and was carried by partners like Buddy Austin and Johnny Barnett in tag matches since his heart was weak, the lead up to his dropping the title to Bruno Sammartino on May 17, 1963 in Madison Square Garden in 47 seconds, which began Sammartino's near 7-year run as WWF champion. Rogers did some wrestling mainly around Montreal after recovering, but for the most part, was retired by 1964. He made a brief comeback a few years later for the Sheik in Detroit, and disappeared from the scene once again. In 1978, he made a surprise return, wrestling as a main event babyface in Florida for about 1 year. He then left for the Carolinas, as a heel manager of Jimmy Snuka, Ken Patera and a few others, which included wrestling 3 matches against Flair that are now legendary. Sometime later, Rogers wound up in the WWF doing Rogers' Corner, an interview segment that was the forerunner of Piper's Pit, as a babyface and wound up as manager of Snuka in 1982 when Snuka made his babyface turn on Lou Albano. Rogers wrestled a few tag matches with Snuka against Albano and Stevens before suffering a broken hip prior to a scheduled match in Madison Square Garden, at which point, his association with the WWF was ended over a lawsuit and he retired. In 1984, Rogers and Larry Sharpe opened up the original Monster Factory, but Rogers later moved from his longtime New Jersey home and retired to South Florida. Rogers was known for keeping up a daily training regimen of swimming and doing lightweight training, sets of 30 reps, to preserve the physique that made him famous. About 1 month ago, Rogers slipped in a supermarket and broke his arm in 3 places. He dropped about 20 pounds and while in rehabilitation, suffered a mild stroke which left his speech slurred. On Monday, June 22 in the morning while taking a shower, he collapsed again from the second major stroke, and his wife called 911 and he was taken to the hospital and never recovered. Beach Blast final poll results. Thumbs up 307, 79.5%. Thumbs down 26, 06.7%. In the middle 53, 13.7%. Best match poll. Sting vs. Cactus Jack 237. Rick Rude vs. Rick Steamboat 85. Steiners vs. Terry Gordy and Steve Williams 23. Brian Pillman vs. Scotty Flamingo 12. Worst match poll. Greg Valentine vs. Marcus Bagwell 151. Steiners vs. Terry Gordy and Steve Williams 32. Ron Simmons vs. Taylor Made Man 21. Rick Rude vs. Rick Steamboat 14. Clash of the Champions final poll results. Thumbs up 234, 78.3%. Thumbs down 36, 12.0%. In the middle 29, 09.7%. Best match poll. Liger and Pillman vs. Benoit and Wellington 199. Williams and Gordy vs. Steiners 31. Anderson and Eden vs. Rhodes and Wyndham 9. Worst match poll. Hazy and Nagami vs. Headhunter Sanquat 58. Gordy and Williams vs. O'Days 55. Freebirds vs. Silver Kings 55. Steamboat and Koloff vs. Malenkos 9. Based on phone calls, letters and fax messages to the Observer as of Monday, June 22. Margin of error, 100%. The poll results showing that most readers enjoyed both shows has to be taken as good news. But the bad news is that not nearly enough people viewed each show. Beach Blast drew an estimated 0.4 buy rate, which is an estimated 70,000 buys and $1.4 million gross, all 3 of which are by far the lowest of any WCW pay-per-view event in history. WCW's share from the show should be approximately $630,000, with another pay-per-view show in 3 weeks which now, combined with the elimination of the Steiners killing most of the interest in the tag team tournament, makes it, as far as drawing goes, a one-match show with Sting vs. Big Van Vader. Even though there is something of a grudge involved because of the legit injury, the storyline has been rather clumsy with Sting immediately acting like the injury was nothing when it happened and now all of a sudden them playing it up as a major injury. Even with the tradition of the Bash, they'll be hard-pressed to equal the Beach Blast numbers. 3 weeks is simply too short to build up a pay-per-view show, and they obviously scheduled far too many big shows in too short a time period, This is not pointing the finger at current management because these decisions were actually made by Turner Home Entertainment. The Clash on Monday did a 2.8 rating with a 4.8 share, seen on average in 1,634,000 homes. All three of those numbers are also all-time lows for clashes, a full 24% drop from the previous clash which set the previous all-time low. While most expected this clash, for a number of reasons, to be the lowest rated one ever, to drop to this level was a major shocker, since no previous clash had ever done below a 3.7. The two lowest rated clashes in history: the January 21, 1992 clash from Topeka, Sting and Ricky Steamboat vs. Rick Rude and Steve Austin, and the September 5, 1991 clash from Augusta, Georgia, Arnold Anderson and Larry Zbyszko vs. Rick Steiner and Bill Kazmay. Both did 3.7 ratings. The clash sandwiched between those two on November 19, 1991 from Savannah, Georgia, headlined by Lex Luger vs. Rick Steiner, but most remembered for the Rick Steamboat and Dustin Rhodes tag title win over Anderson and Zbyszko, drew a 4.3 rating. While some in the company tried to use convenient excuse K as in K. Allen Fry, for coming up with the entire tournament and return of the NWA idea, which would be a hard sell to begin with, that is forgetting that the promotion itself, after Fry left, never even attempted to familiarize the fans with any of the outside talent. Thus the show never had a chance. Others outside the wrestling company tried to put the blame on the show not actually being live, but in this case that wasn't even a factor. At the same time, it's way too early to blame the new regime for any of these numbers. While others may use the fact that this show went head-to-head with WWF primetime wrestling in the Eastern and Central time zones, which resulted in the lowest-rated prime time of all time, and say the two shows wound up splitting the audience, judging from the ratings of the first hour of this. With no competition from prime time in any time zone, that doesn't appear to hold water, as the first hour unopposed did a 2.4 rating while the 90 minutes that went head-to-head with prime time did a 3.0. The ratings built steadily from a 2.1 at the start to a 2.9 for Freebird Silver Kings. The audience first peaked during the Pillman and Liger vs. Benoit in Wellington, 3.2, dropped during Hazy and Nagami vs. Headhunters match, 2.9, before popping back to a 3.3, 1.96 million homes, for Williams and Gordy vs. Steiners. The poor showings of both Beach Blast and The Clash were part of yet another weekend from June 20th to June 22nd which set new lows for cable television ratings. These numbers are even more ominous when it comes to WCW because ratings traditionally increase the weekend of a major show, in particular the first television show after a pay-per-view, because the vast majority of fans still don't have access to pay-per-view, plus, of those who do, in this case, few ordered it to begin with, and it's their first chance to find out. Even so, Main Event did just a 1.9 rating while WCW, 1 hour before the pay-per-view, did a miserable 1.6 and Power Hour did a 1.4. WWF numbers were nearly as bad, with All American doing a 2.2 and Prime Time, which went head-to-head with The Clash, doing an all-time low 1.6. While Prime Time can't be blamed for anything but a little of a poor ratings of the WCW Clash, since the ratings started off so poorly when there was no other wrestling competition on cable, the fact that there was a clash on opposite prime time probably did swing some regular viewers away, since the rating was so much lower than it has ever been. What looked to be potentially the biggest drawing independent show in the United States of 1992, the July 4th AAA show in Los Angeles, has undergone some changes. The originally scheduled Atsushi Onita vs. Horace Boulder main event has been scrapped since there was a falling out between Onita and the local promoters. Supposedly Onita held them up for a major advance and the promotion nixed it, which means none of the FMW wrestlers except those who are living in Tijuana will appear. The promotion felt that Onita himself only drew 200 fans to the original Japanese lucha card, since there were only 200 Japanese fans there, and that the big draw is El Hijo del Santo, since he got the most heat and most of the fans were Mexican. While that is probably correct, the group is going to run into major problems and blow what could be a real success because of lack of organization. This group has drawn more than 3,000 fans in 2 of the first 3 shows, virtually all walk-up, with no television, mainly through advertising locally in the Spanish media. However, the repeated lineup changes and no shows will eventually run the audience down if they aren't addressed. For instance, at the last card, it was announced that Onita and Octagon would be there, neither of whom are now scheduled. As of press time, the show will still be outdoors at the Cal State Los Angeles football field, with a triple main event of Conan vs. El Cobarde 2 in a hair vs. hair match, Santo vs. Mondo Guerrero and Pero Aguayo vs. Super Astro. A few more matches have been added to the SummerSlam lineup on the announcements on the European television show Tatanka vs. Berserker, Beverly Brothers vs. Natural Disasters, and Repo Man vs. Crush. Titan sources insist that the show sold 80,000 tickets and $3 million the first day tickets went on sale. The entire show will consist of matches that aren't taking place on the current house show run, so I suspect the card will introduce the new programs for the fall, and if the aforementioned matches are any indication, well, there's always the NBA. New Japan ran its major show at Budokan Hall this past Friday night, June 26th, drawing a sellout of 14,214 fans. Two titles changed hands on the show, with Rick and Scott Steiner regaining the IWGP Tag Team titles from Bam Bam Bigelow and Big Van Vader, and El Samurai winning the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title from Jushin Liger. The main event saw Riki Choshu retain the IWGP World Heavyweight title, pinning Masa Chono. Budokan Hall is the home for the big All Japan shows, and arena management wasn't nearly as lenient in working with New Japan, insisting that the show end by 9 p.m. This meant they could only run 8 matches. Several mid-level wrestlers such as Kengo Kimura, Norio Onaga, Hiro Saito, Osamu Kido, and imports Pimpinela Escarlata and May Flowers from Mexico, and even Masa Saito didn't appear, and all of the matches had to last less than 20 minutes. In addition, the wrestlers were told not to wrestle outside the ring because arena management didn't want the floor scratched up, told not to use chairs because they were owned by Budokan and management wanted them left alone, and wanted them to stay off the whips into the guardrail for fear of marking the flaw. Because of all this, the show was said to not have been the caliber of All Japan's shows in the same building or some of New Japan's major cards. Complete results saw: 1. Satoshi Kojima and Hiroyoshi Yamamoto beat Koji Kanemoto and Osamu Nishimura. 2. Super Strong Machine Junji Hirata pinned Pegasus Kid Chris Benoit with a diving headbutt off the top rope. 3. The Samoans Kokina and Semu beat Scott Norton and Killer B, Brian Blair, when Kokina splashed B in 10:40. 4. Samurai won the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title from Liger, when Liger had Samurai up for a powerbomb, but Samurai reversed it into a cradle in 13:01. This match was much shorter than their previous major card matches because of the time constraints. 5. Kijimuto and Shinya Hashimoto beat Black Cat and Takayuki Izuka in 7:54 when Hashimoto pinned Cat with a mule kick. Cat subbed for Akira Nagami, who was injured a few days earlier, which ruined what on paper would have been a good match. Cat was the obvious jobber here, and it was considered a bad match. 6. Hiroshi Hazi pinned former tag partner Kensuke Sasaki, returning after 10 months off from a broken ankle, in 15:15 with the Northern Lights suplex. This was said to have been a super match and the best one on the card. 7. Steiners beat Vader and Bigelow in 16:24. Finish of the match saw a big pop when Rick German suplexed Vader. Vader came back and powerbombed Scott, and Bigelow gave Scott a big splash. However, during the finish, ref Masao Tiger Hattori was knocked out. Ref bump finish comes to Japan, so Bigelow has Scott pinned for several seconds, but no ref. Bigelow got up and went to get the ref up, and while his back was turned, Scott tagged Rick, and when Bigelow turned around, Rick dropped him with a belly-to-belly suplex and got the pin. Told it was a good American-style match, but the fans didn't like the American-style finish. 8. Choshu pinned Chono with a lariat in 17:57. Told it was good live because the crowd was into it because of Chono's psychology, but it probably wouldn't look as good on television because there weren't a lot of flashy moves. The complete lineup for the NWA Singles Tournament, which takes place from August 6 to August 12 in Japan, was announced as well. The tournament will be a 16-man, single elimination tournament, similar to that of the NWA Tag Team Tournament, rather than Japanese style like the G1 Classic last year, where they were broken up into divisions and everyone faced everyone. The field will be Rick Steiner, Scott Steiner, Arnold Anderson, Ron Simmons, Steve Austin, Rick Rude, Barry Windham, Big Van Vader, Scott Norton, Tony Hall May, Bam Bam Bigelow, Kijimuto, Masa Chono, Shinya Hashimoto, Hiroshi Hazi, and Kensuke Sasaki. Bracketing hasn't been announced as of yet. Apparently this won't be carried on pay-per-view in the United States. No word on it being carried on any television, but it would probably bolster ratings for one weekend to carry the entire tournament, as if it's a live deal on the 3 cable shows. Pegasus Kid and David Taylor England are also booked on the tour, but won't be a part of the tournament. Too bad, since Kid is a better worker than almost everyone in the tournament and is more over in Japan than all but a handful. Neither will Riki Choshu or Tatsumi Fujinami be a part of the tournament. Since Sting wasn't coming as WCW champion, Choshu felt that competing for the NWA title would make the NWA title seem more important than the IWGP title, which is something he didn't want to do. Fujinami would have to do a job for someone, and he's in a position now where he's kind of in limbo, as it serves no real purpose for him to beat any of today's stars, but he really can't do jobs for all but a few either. AAA. The biggest card from the past week was June 23rd in Monterrey, which airs on television this coming Sunday. El Matematico Tres and Cuatro beat Dr. Maldad and Mr. Maldad in a mini superstars match. Dorito Estrada and Pirotita Morgan and El Picudito beat Octagon Cheeto and Mascarita Sagrada and Angelito Aztec. Winners in Super Colo, who as a heel worked as El Diabolico Chucky from the Chucky horror movies, and El Galactico beat Marimoto and Terremoto and Hectatomber in a match where Galactico was pinned and did a stretcher job after the first fall and El Molino replaced him as the face T. Winners team went on to win the second and third falls. Cien Caras and Universo 2000 and Blue Panther beat Super Muñeco and Fantasma and Elio del Santo via DQ, and Santo pulled off Panther's mask, although there was heel because heel ref El Torrantes, who was pushed as more of a heel than the heel wrestlers, saw Panther give Santo a low blow and did nothing about it, and the main event saw Perro Arguello beat Fishman via DQ in 20 minutes when Cien Caras attacked Arguello in the third fall and beat on him for nearly 4 minutes until Torrantes finally disqualified him. Based on post-match challenges, it seems they are setting up a July 3rd match with Conan returning to team with Arguello against Caras and Fishman. Only the final 3 matches air on television, so no midgets this weekend. This past Sunday's 6-man main event of Octagon and Santo and Arguello versus Panther and La Parca and Fishman was about 3.25 stars, with Fishman brawling pretty good to set up the singles match, and both Fishman and Arguello, age 46, doing dives out of the ring. Octagon had a Mexican middleweight title defense against Fuerza Guerrera on June 27 in a Patlaco. Mascara Año 2000 was scheduled to return this past weekend after missing 6 weeks with an eye injury from an inadvertent poke in the eyes. EMLL. The official announcement was made on June 19 that this group has stripped Cien Caras, Blue Panther and Mascarita Sagrada of the CMLL World Heavyweight, World Middleweight and World Mini Superstars Championships respectively, since they've all jumped to AAA. Tournaments will be held for the heavyweight and middleweight belts, but since all the minis jumped, expect that title to be dropped. June 26 at Arena Mexico in Mexico City saw Lola Gonzalez and La Sirenita beat Xochitl Hamada and Super Estrella in 2 straight falls, with the second fall being via countout 3 stars. The final 2 survivors of a 16-man battle royal to determine the 2 men who will face each other for the vacated CMLL middleweight title were Dandy and Negro Casas, who I assume will wrestle on July 3 at Arena Mexico 2.75 stars. The new Infernales MS1 and Parada Morgan and Satanico beat Atlantis and Brazo de Plata and Faraon when MS1 pinned Faraon 3 stars, and King Haku, working as a babyface, and Canadian Vampire Casanova and Rayo de Jalisco Jr. beat Pierroth Jr. and Sangre Chicana and Emilio Charles Jr. 2.75 stars when Haku pinned Pierroth with a thrust kick. New gimmick on the way is Frankenstein, managed by Professor Satan. June 21 at Arena Mexico saw Atlantis and Dandy and Ultimate Dragon Yoshihiro Asai beat the Untouchables Jacques Mate and Pierroth Jr. and Massacre in 2 straight falls, first fall via DQ, to set up a title match. Although the rematch on June 28 is another non-title, plus Nitron and Jerry Estrada and La Fiera beat Love Machine, Art Bar, and El Hijo de Lizmark and Blue Demon Jr. For those with dishes, the EMLL television show airs on Morelos 1, ch. 14 starting at between 3 and 4 p.m. Pacific Time, varies by the week, while UWA airs on M1, ch. 2 in ch. 8 at 1:30 p.m. Pacific Time, both on Saturdays. Los Brazos drew Chicana and Charles and Nitron in the main event June 23 at Arena Coliseo in Mexico City. They had a major show on June 23 in Cuernavaca, headlined by Atlantis beating Dandy in what was said to have been an excellent face versus face match to keep the NWA middleweight title. Love Machine and Lizmark and Ultimate Dragon beat Untouchables in a non-title match in Los Metalico. Oro and Plata and Bronce drew the Space Warriors, Guerrero del Future and Guerrero Maya and Damian El Guerrero, plus Baby Richard and Master beat Guerrero, Samurai Das and Eclipse. June 28 in Monterrey was a triangular series of matches with Rick Patterson, Vampire and Chicana, in which the first man to lose twice loses his hair, with heel ref El Gato Montini as referee, which makes people think Vampire might actually lose. Also, Mil Mascaras makes a rare EMLL appearance, teaming with Love Machine and Ultimate Dragon versus the Untouchables in a non-title, and Los Brazos versus the new Infernales. America was announced as the new UWF Super Welterweight Champion from winning the tournament in Japan. The wrestler who won the tournament in Japan was Pantera Das, who is the same wrestler as America. There was a story in La Prensa about the wrestlers performing in a part-time rock band which includes Kung Fu America and Grand Apache I. 3 local wrestlers in the Puebla area, Ray Pantera, Aristocrata and Chameleon, was killed in a car accident on June 14. UWA. June 21 at El Torreo in Naucalpan saw Villano Trace win the UWA Junior Heavyweight title from the Killer in 21 minutes. the Can-Am Express, Dan Crawford and Doug Furness, and Connect beat Los Efectivos, Silver King and El Texano, and Enrique Vera in a match which saw both Efectivos Jew, Bullpain and Zandokan and Black Power Dos beat El Coloso and Celestial and Villano I, El Matematico I and Moxuma and Oro de Tigre beat El Bucanero Jr. and Steel Warriors via DQ and El Espano Cuatro and Idru Lasser and Arrow Flash. Most of the major house show main events this past week saw Can-Am Express team with a heel against Los Cowboys and a face. Celestial, Alvaro Mendez, formerly Blackman, won the UWA welterweight title from El Espanto Jr. on June 25 at Arena Pista Revolucion in Mexico City. Espanto dropped the title because he's leaving for AAA. June 19 in Netzahualcoyot drew 2000 as Cassandro and Rudy Reyna beat Ninja Sasuke and El Matematico I 2.5 stars. Celestial and El Coloso beat Dr. Wagner Jr. and Espanto Jr. via DQ 1 3/4 stars. Los Efectivos and Vera beat Zandokan and Bullpain and Killer 2 1/4 star. June 26 television taping in Netzahualcoyot had Dos Caras return to team with Gran Hamada and Villano Trace vs. Connect and Zandokan and Killer plus Efectivos vs. Can-Am Express in a non-title match. Efectivos defended UWA tag belts on June 28 at El Toreo against Can-Am Express, and I suspect the belts changed. New Japan. The tour ended with the June 26 show at Budokan Hall, and the next tour starts in mid-July. June 25 in Fukushima drew 2,880 as Riki Choshu and Masa Saito and Shinya Hashimoto beat the Samoans, Kokina and Semu and Bam Bam Bigelow when Hashimoto pinned Semu. Scott Norton and Killer B, Brian Blair, beat Takayuki Izuka and Masa Chono when Norton pinned Izuka. Super Strong Machine and Tatsutoshi Goto and Hiro Saito beat Black Cat and Hiroshi Hazi and Kijimuto. Samurai and Pegasus Kid beat Koji Kanemoto and Jushin Liger. Kengo Kimura and Kantaro Hoshino beat Mayflowers and Pimpinella Escarlata, and Osamu Kido pinned Masanobu Kuris. June 24 in Niigata drew a sellout 3,630 as Choshu and Masa Saito and Izuka beat Kimura and Hazi and Chono when Saito gave Kimura the Saito suplex. Samoans beat Bigelow and beat Machine and Norton beat Muto and Hashimoto when Norton pinned Muto with a power slap. Kid and Oniga beat Liger and Kanemoto. Samurai pinned Hiro Saito. Kido pinned Goto and Satoshi Kojima and Hiroyoshi Yamamoto beat Flowers and Escarlata. Tatsumi Fujinami's opponent for the July 8 show in Yokohama is Richard Byrne, who I believe is a northeastern independent wrestler doing a karate gimmick. The entire deal with Kunyaki Kobayashi and Shiro Koshinaka being fired is an angle to bring them back as a heel trio, probably with Kengo Kimura as the third member, since the three have all had strong runs in the past and need something to revitalize them as they are lost in the shuffle. Actually, it wasn't even supposed to occur the way it did, as the Masashi Aoyagi card was supposed to have Aoyagi versus Randy Thornton, the little football player who has done a little bit of wrestling on top, but Thornton no-showed and Aoyagi called New Japan for help in saving his card, and they lent him Kobayashi to do a job so Aoyagi could win back the board in front of his dojo, since New Japan was done with the angle anyway. Actually, it was Aoyagi who juiced and the match was stopped when Kobayashi was knocked out, as we had it a little wrong last time. Some heat with Vader. Vader is on salary here in that he earns a certain amount per year no matter how many weeks per year he's booked. Probably in the $200,000 range. Anyway, when he blew out his knee on the previous tour, New Japan wanted him to go home and rest and get it taken care of so he'd be ready for the June 26th show, and supposedly they agreed to take care of whatever medical expenses there would be. Instead, Vader worked on the WCW Louisiana tour and blew the knee out again, but didn't even miss one date, which didn't set well with management. At one point there was question as to the long-term relationship, but it appears everything is okay now. June 20th television show with Muto and Kimura vs. Choshu and Izuka on top drew an 8.47.6 rating. All Japan. Billy Black and Richard Slinger were added to the tour that opens July 4th. Television taping cards for this tour are: July 4 Mitsuharu Misawa and Toshiaki Kawada and Kenta Kobashi vs. Stan Hansen and Johnny Ace and Barry Horowitz, Jumbo Tsuruta and Akira Tao vs. Abdullah the Butcher and Giant Kimala Das, Yoshinari Ogawa and Mighty Inoue vs. Billy Black, and the Patriot. Del Wilkes, July 5 has Tsuruta and Tao vs. Hansen and Black, Misawa and Kawada vs. Patriot and Slinger and Kobashi and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi defending the Asian Tag Team titles against Ogawa and Masafuchi. July 8 has Tsuruta and Tao vs. Kawada and Kikuchi. Hansen vs. Kobashi. Ace vs. Misawa and Patriot and Black vs. Butcher and Kimala Das. July 11th has Tsuruta and Tao and Fuchi vs. Misawa and Kawada and Kikuchi. July 17th has Misawa and Kobashi vs. Hansen and Ace. Tsuruta and Tao vs. Patriot and Black and Kawada and Kikuchi vs. Fuchi and Ogawa. July 21st has Tsuruta and Tao and Fuchi vs Misawa and Kawada and Kobashi, Hansen vs Patriot and Kikuchi vs Horowitz. July 29th tour ends in Matsuda with Hansen vs Tao for the Triple Crown, Tsuruta and Fuchi vs Misawa and Kikuchi, Kawada vs Ogawa and Patriot and Kobashi vs Butcher and Kimala Das. June 21st television show with Hansen vs Kawada Triple Crown match drew a 5.9/3.5 rating. FMW. The Sheik, at the age of 67, became probably the oldest man ever to be recognized as world champion as he captured the WWA World Martial Arts title from Atsushi Onita on June 25 at the Nakajima Center in Sapporo before a sellout 6,508 fans in a no-rope barbed wire death match. Before the match started, Onita was in the ring, Sheik hadn't arrived, and out came Tiger Jeet Singh, who attacked Onita with his saber and juiced him. Color photos of a bloody Onita being attacked by Singh made the front page the next day of Tokyo Sports, which shows Singh still has some name value. The Sheik came out and used a gimmick to make things worse. Onita got the gimmick and juiced Sheik, then Sheik pulled out a new gimmick and caught Onita in the throat and pinned him, all in 3:29 and threw 2 fireballs afterwards. This set up a match on Gan Ryujima in a jungle death match made famous several years ago by Antonio Inoki and Masa Saito, with no fans, with Onita against Singh. Also Mr. Ganasuke and Samba Asako and Tarzan Goto beat Body Snatcher, Louis Piccoli and Sabu and the Gladiator, Mike Alfonso, White African and Horace Boulder beat Great Punk and Ricky Fuji. June 26th in Aomori drew a sellout 2,329 as Onita and Asako and Ganasuke beat Boulder and Sabu and Gladiator in a street fight. Punk and Goto beat African and Snatcher and Sheik DDQ Fuji in 145. June 24th in Asahikawa drew a sellout 3,411 as Boulder and Sabu and Gladiator beat Ganasuke and Asako and Onita in a street fight. Goto beat African in a barbed wire match, Sheik DDQ Punk and Snatcher pinned Fuji. June 27th in Harinamichi drew 2,519 as Gladiator and Boulder and African beat Onita and Asako and Fuji in a street fight. Goto pinned Snatcher and Sheik and Sabu beat Punk and Ganasuke in 120. Next tour is July 19th to August 11th with Sheik, Sabu, Big Titan, Gladiator, and Boulder. Huge woman judoka Gundarenko Terechikova, who did gimmick mixed matches here, was competing last week in the Olympic trials for the Barcelona Games. Expect Leo Del Santo to come in now that FMW and AAA have a talent trading agreement. Other Japanese notes. Akira Maeda announced a July 16th card in Osaka headlined by himself against Willie Williams, a big-time star in karate in the 1970s, in which the loser agrees to retire. Since Williams is 41 and had retired years ago and just came back for this run, I guess the result sounds guaranteed. Maeda's retirement means the end of Rings, of course. Rings on June 25th in Sendai drew a sellout 4,300 as Maeda made Hans Niemann submit in 6:35 while Williams KO'd Tom Von Mork to set up Maeda vs. Williams. The August 21st Hamamatsu Arena Rings show will probably be headlined by Maeda vs. Masaki Sadake. Pro Wrestling Fujiwara-gumi sold out Tokyo's Korakuen Hall with 2,200 on June 25th for the Masami Soranaka Memorial Show with a major upset as Bart Vale retained the PWF title, knocking out Yoshiaki Fujiwara in 1854, plus Masakatsu Funaki beat Kazuo Takahashi, Minoru Suzuki beat Yuki Ishikawa and Jerry Flynn beat Ryushi Yanagisawa. With Soranaka's death, the August 15th show originally set for Tampa has been cancelled and will instead take place in Tokushima with Suzuki vs. Joe Sorkoff, Joe Malenko, as the main event. All Japan Women announced the main event on the August 15th show at Korakuen Hall as a hair vs. hair match with Manami Toyota vs. Toshio Yamada. Interesting since Toyota and Yamada are still both the UWA, Mexican, and WWWA World Tag Team Champions. Terry Power started for All Japan Women and is already in main events and will be getting a shot at Kyoko Inoue's All-Pacific title on July 15th at the Ota Ward Gym in Tokyo. That will be one of the biggest shows of the year as Toyota defends the IWA title, Mariko Yoshida defends the Japanese title and Bull Nakano defends her world title all on the same show. I suspect Asia Kong and Bison Kimura will beat Toyota and Yamada for the tag titles between now and then and defend them on the show as well. June 25th in Katsura saw Yamada and Toyota and Kyoko Inoue beat Kong and Power and Kwaro Ito Akira Hokuto pin Takako Inoue Nakano and Bat Yoshinaga over Suzuka Minami and Mima Shimoda. Yumiko Hata pinned Miori Kamiya, Etsuko Mita pinned Tomoko Watanabe and Debbie Malenko and Seiki Hasegawa beat Cynthia Moreno and Yoshide. June 27 television taping at the Omiya Skate Center drew 2,500 as Yamada and Toyota kept the WWA and UWA tag titles, winning 2 out of 3 falls from Kyoko Inoue and Hokuto in a match with all the super workers, which went 24 minutes before Toyota used the Japanese Ocean Cyclone suplex on Ino, similar to a combination German suplex and pile driver. Kong and Power and Kamiya beat Hata and Minami and Nakano. Yoshida pinned Mita to retain the Japanese title. Shimoda beat Takako Inui and Hasegawa pinned Malenko. Bison Kimura has been out of action since an injury in her June 21 singles match against Kong. How's this for a new name? Genichiro Tenryu's Revolution promotion has changed its name to War. The initials stand for Wrestling and Romance. Something definitely lost in the translation here. The Universal UWF Super Welterweight Tournament saw June 14 in Soka. Pantera Dos beat Rocky Santana, Ninja Turtle No. 1 in Mexico, and Super Dolphin, Monkey Magic Wakita, beat Cyclone Ramirez in the semifinals, and Pantera Dos pinned Dolphin on June 15 in Soka to win the title. The tour ended on June 21 at Korakuen Hall as Pantera Dos pinned Ramirez to retain the title, and after the match Dolphin attacked him. Punish and Crush regained the UWA-UWF Intercontinental Tag Team titles from Scorpio Jr. and Shu El Guerrero, but after winning the belt, Punish and Crush broke up with Punish as the heel since he hit Crush with a chair and then hit Kendo, the most popular wrestler in the promotion, with a chair when he tried to break things up. Dos Caras and Gran Hamada beat Villanos Cuatro and V, and after the match Punish attacked Hamada to make sure everyone got the message he was a heel, and Kendo and Robin Hood and Dolphin beat Rambo and El Engendro and Santana. Santana got over great on this tour because facially he looks too much like Onita, and did an Onita spoof as his gimmick. The next tour starts August 15 with Great Sasuke, Masa Michinoku, Kendo, Pantera Dos, Shu El Guerrero, Scorpio Jr., Pantrita Del Ring, Bucanero Jr., Rocky Santana and Zando Khan, Lightning Kid and Dynamic Lynn, Jerry Lynn. Oriental Pro Wrestling's first tour will be July 26 through August 4 with Mike Winner, Ron, and Don Harris, Jesse Barr, Carl Pope, a Sandy Bar trainee who hasn't had his first pro match yet, and Samita, the Samoan working prelims in Oregon who was trained by Jerry Monty, along with 3 wrestlers from Korea. Steve Cox is coming to UWFI starting on the July 12th show. Wing will crown World Tag Team Champions in August, bringing in a tag team from the UWA, the Headhunters and others. Dick Murdoch and Dick Slater as the Hardliners were scheduled for tour, but with Slater signed with WCW. That's probably out. Solid Wing Mr. Pogo vs. Mitsuhiro Matsunaga barbed wire baseball bat death match, and it was one of the sicker gimmicks thus far. But it is a must-see match because the fireball finish has to be seen to be believed, as Pogo pours lighter fluid all over Matsunaga's body and blows a fireball out of his mouth a la Steamboat onto him. USWA. June 22 in Memphis drew 1,300 fans and $6,700 as the Hornet, Ron Oakes, beat Mike Miller via DQ. Lauren Davenport beat Dirty White Girl Kim in a boxing match. Brian Christopher DDQ Tom Pritchard in a match which ended up with the Southern title being held up. Jerry Lawler won a handicap match from Mike Doggendorf and Dennis Coraluzzo, WWA promoter out of New Jersey, when he threw fire at Doggendorf and then pinned Coraluzzo. Eddie Gilbert retained the USWA title, beating Tony Anthony, a hospital elimination match. Only way to be eliminated is to bleed. With all 3 Moondogs, Fike returned versus Jeff Jarrett, and Pez Watley and Billy Travis ended in no decision when everyone bled and Lawler beat Mike Samples via DQ. On television June 27, Travis wrestled Miller, with the winner becoming number 1 contender for the held-up Southern title. It went to a time limit draw. They announced that if Christopher beats Pritchard on June 29 and regains the title, he'll become the number 1 contender for Gilbert's title, since there was a no-return clause in the Lawler-Gilbert, so Lawler won't be getting a title shot soon. Christopher talked about winning the title when Gilbert came out, almost acting like a face, and they argued until Richard Lee came out and said it doesn't matter which of them wins, because Moondog Spike will beat either of them and win the title. They were all arguing when Mike Samples came out and said this was all a plot by Eddie Marlin so all of their guys would be at odds with each other, but Samples couldn't get them to stop arguing. Bob Cook, Pat Rose and John Peterson, using the name John Davenport, were all in for television. Cook and Rose wrestled Lawler and Jarrett, which ended when the Moondogs attacked Lawler and Jarrett, and in to make the save with a garbage can. Cleaning house was Jackie Fargo, the area's biggest drawing card in the 1960s, who then did an interview. June 29 in Memphis as Travis vs. Falk, with the winner becoming next in line for the Southern title. Hornet vs. Samples, Miller vs. Anthony, with the loser having to watch his valet take 10 lashes from the other valet. Christopher vs. Pritchard with 2 poles, one of which has a surprise in a box on top of it and the other which has a chain in a box on top of it. For the Southern title, Gilbert vs. Spike for the USWA title, and Lawler and Jarrett vs. Moondog, Spot and Cujo in a cage match with Fargo as referee. Texas. Global on June 26 at the Dallas Sportatorium drew 219 fans, most under 12 freebies, as Terry Sims pinned Chaz Taylor to retain the GWF light heavyweight title. The Connection, John Tatum and Rod Price, beat Tug Taylor and Brian Henning. Scott Putski beat Maniac Mike Davis, via countout. Sam Houston returned and pinned Alex Porto to keep the GWF television title. Houston and Sims beat Porto and Mike. Johnny Mantell pinned Henning. Chaz Taylor pinned El Diablo. Porto, Tribal Nation, Chris and Mark Youngblood, beat Stephen Dane and Nieri Young to win the GWF tag team titles. However, new commissioner Fred Farah, playing a heel commissioner, returned the belts to Dane and Young for no apparent reason. Tribal Nation drew Connection and Scott Putski pinned Mantell to retain the GWF North American title. Steve Cox no-showed the card. Rumor has it Eric Embry will return in 2 weeks. Gary Hart is in as a babyface manager feuding with Skander Akbar. After confronting Akbar, Hart was attacked by Young, Dane and Tug Taylor, all of whom he got the first shot in on before the 4-on-1 situation. Hart is in tight with Global's new money people, but they've only committed to 8 weeks, 3 of which are in the past. Only match advertised for July 3rd is a 15-man battle royal. Big D Pro Wrestling drew 148 fans on June 28 in Dallas as Ray Evans beat Tom Powers, Hurricane Mike beat Jimmy James by DQ, Action Jackson pinned Young, who was legit fired from the group after the match, California Stud Price pinned Dane, Iceman King Parsons pinned Scott Bratta. Sean Stevens regained the held-up Big D title from John Tatum when Freddie Fargo tried to interfere and hit Tatum with the belt but was cut off. Tatum got the belt and hit Stevens with it and pinned him, but a second ref came to ringside and told the first ref what happened and he reversed his decision. Fargo then stuffed a wad of money into the second ref's shirt pockets. Chris Love has taken over as booker for Big D from Tatum. Love will continue to work in Tennessee and is said to have a new backer to run Wednesday and Saturday night shows in Dallas starting in a few weeks under the Championship Wrestling from Texas name. July 5th show has Tatum and Stud defending the Big D tag belts against Parsons and Jackson and Stevens vs. Mike for the heavyweight title. Oregon. This group will finally get over the air local television starting July 11th when CH32 in Salem, Oregon moves to Portland and the shows will air twice every Saturday. June 27th in Portland drew about 60 fans as Dirty White Boy Bobby Blair returned as a babyface and pinned Damian Knight. Mike Winner pinned John Rambo, Bart Sawyer pinned Samita the Samoan, Colonel De Beers pinned Buddy Wayne, and Ron and Don Harris went to a 30-minute draw with C.W. Bergstrom and Jesse Baugh. No angles were set up for next week when the card moves outdoors to Sandy Bar's Flea Market with 2 live bands and fireworks. 2 of the cards this past week were canceled and payoffs for the spot shows that still take place were cut to $25 here and there. Southern California local promoters are talking about running weekly lucha shows at the Hollywood Palladium. Buck Robley's group on June 21st in Houma, Louisiana saw Joey Maggs pin Buddy Lee Parker, Kevin Sullivan beat Frogman LeBranc, Butch Reed pinned Abdullah the Butcher, Steve Pritchard and Chris Adams beat Night Stalker, and Primetime Ron Powers and Junkyard Dog pinned Bob Orton in a lumberjack match. They taped television on June 22nd in New Orleans with Powers beating Robert Gibson, Reed over Manny Fernandez, Paul Orndorff beat Orton, and Adams beat Kevin Sullivan via DQ plus squash wins by JYD, Abdullah Maggs, and Night Stalker. Herb Abrams' first UWF show in quite a while took place on June 19th in Spartanburg, South Carolina before 912 fans, 300 paid, with squash wins by Steve Ray and Sonny Beach, Ivan Koloff. Orton working as a babyface as Southern States champion. Helmut Hessel, Chuck Smith, with manager Kevin Casey, A. Perry, Paul Orndorff, Death Row 3260 as a face. Only in wrestling can someone on Death Row be a face. Barry Horowitz, Pez Watley, Night Stalker, and Jimmy Valiant. Other bouts saw Orton beat Hessler, Valiant beat Koloff via DQ when Koloff pinned Valiant after using the chain. Herb Abrams ran out and reversed the decision, and Colonel Red, Koloff's manager, beat up Abrams with his cane, and Abrams juiced and did a stretcher job. Orndorff turned heel in what started as a face versus face match with Orton and won the Southern title in 1934. Beach pinned Horowitz, Pez Watley for Vladimir Koloff. Death Row 3260 beat Night Stalker via DQ when Night Stalker tried to use the axe. Ray beat Hessler by DQ. Card lasted 4 hours, 10 minutes. Next show is August 21st with Valiant vs. Vladimir Koloff. Abrams' only TV right now is Prime Network out of Los Angeles, which runs Saturday morning and Sunday night time slots, with 1 show per week being the old tapes from years back and 1 show being the new tapes. One of the funniest bits of banter on TV in recent weeks took place between Boney Blackstone and Sam Kent on the local wrestling block in Atlanta. Ken made a remark that Blackstone is dressing up like Missy Hyatt, but if she wanted to really be like Missy Hyatt, she was going to need to have some surgery done. After a commercial break, Blackstone comes on with Joe Pedicino and acts like she's furious about the nerve of Sam Kent to make a remark like that, and goes on and on about how insulting it was and how she isn't going to have any surgery, and finally declares that no matter what anyone says, she's not going to have a lobotomy done just so she could be like Missy Hyatt. Iqua drew 100 on June 25th in Tampa as Coconut Man drew Hurricane Walker, Alan Iron Eagle beat Canadian Bad Boy, Jimmy Backlund beat Mad Bill Payne, first Monster Factory student from Florida, Mark Starr over Rico Federico, and Robert Fuller beat Kendall Windham, subbing for Dick Slater, who was working for WCW, via DQ. Larry Sharp's WWA tapes from New Jersey start on CH38 in Tampa next week. Wahoo McDaniel was arrested for a DWI in Spartanburg, South Carolina on Saturday night. LPWA has a tentative television taping scheduled for the Hamlin Field House in St. Paul, Minnesota on July 22nd. John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight was off the air this past weekend due to Arezzi's financial problems and will be off for July 4th since he's scheduled it that way, but he's scheduled to return on July 11th. Vince Russo contacted WEF to try and buy Arezzi's time slot from him. Alex Merves wants to inform his readers he'll have 3 issues of 3 Count done over the next week. He fell behind because of working in New York. Bill Dundee is now running a fireworks stand in Lexington, Tennessee. Fabulous Moolah's Law convention this past weekend in Las Vegas included a show on June 26th at the Dunes Hotel before 203 paid and $3,000. Woody Farmer did a strongman exhibition. Donna Cristantella won a battle royal to get a shot at Moolah's title, which she lost. Johnny Mayung worked, as did Belle Starr, Kitty Adams, and female midget Diamond Lil, against male midget Johnny Garcia, who is said to have put on a great show. WWC on June 25th in Ciales, Puerto Rico saw Muhammad Hussein, Lou Fabiano, beat El Corsario, Rockin' Rebel over Randy Rhodes, Ricky Santana beat Heartbreaker Adonis, Frankie Lancaster, Carlitos Colon DDQ Abdullah the Butcher, Invader No. 1 and Fidel Sierradker Miguelito Perez and Lal. Cyclone Salvadorino pinned Dick Murdoch. WWC Tag Champs Ron Starr and Doug Masters cure Southern Rockers, Steve Dahl and Rex King, and Rebel beat Abdullah. WFWA on June 28th in Winnipeg drew 700 fans for an outdoor show headlined by Bulldog Bob Brown DDQ The Natural and a 10-man battle royal ending with Bob and Kerry Brown surviving, and Kerry turned heel and eliminated his father to win it to set up a feud. Century Toyota in Wallingford, Connecticut ran a free show on June 27th drawing between 100 and 200 people coming and going, which included Warlord, Tasmaniac, Ray Odyssey, Chris Candido, Kevin Sullivan and Jimmy Snuka, with top 2 having Honky Tonk Man DDQ Vic Steamboat and Don Morocco DDQ Tony Atla. Morocco told Atlas, "You look like the guy who pulled the trucker out of his cab in Los Angeles," and Morocco was the face. June 28th in Wallingford, Connecticut drew 1,500 as Odyssey drew Tommy Dreamer 1/2 of 1 star. Johnny Rods pinned Candido 1 1/2 star. Paul Zion pinned Flex Lavender 1/4 of 1 star. Scott Taylor pinned Metal Maniac Dud. Eddie Gilbert and Steamboat beat Sullivan and Tasmaniac via DQ 1 1/2 star. Misty Blue and Crystal Blue and Little Louie over Nasty Girls. Cat La Rue and Linda Dallas and Little Doomer DDU. Atlas pinned Snuka when Atlas used manager Tony Rumble's helmet on Snuka 1/2 of 1 star. Bushwhackers beat Warlord and Barbarian via DQ when Sonny Blaze interfered 1 star and Morocco pinned Honky Tonk Man 1/2 of 1 star. There's a wrestling show from the Philippines on satellite. They have a King Curtis type wrestler who grabbed a live chicken and started eating it with blood gushing out, and all on television. WCW jobber Snake Watson was stabbed to death in Jacksonville. Abdullah Farouk Jr., Bedri Kullah and the Sheik, Ed Farhat, received judgments against promoter Tom Cussati of Pelham, New York for $660 and $690 respectively. Vince Carolyn starts a wrestling talk show on WMSX, 1410 a.m., in Brockton, Massachusetts on July 18th on Saturday afternoons at 4 p.m. Stephen Pettypaws started up Canadian Championship Wrestling in Nova Scotia with weekly Tuesday night cards in Halifax using Goldie Rogers, Cuban Assassin, Angel Acevedo, Pettypaws, Leo Burke, Rick Patterson, Eddie Watts, and Butcher Vachon. Killer Kowalski's IWF on June 20th in Hudson, Massachusetts saw Misty Blue over Linda Dallas, IWF champ Mad Dog Richard DDQ Bulldozer, billed at 6'9", 500 pounds, and Honky Tonk Man, as a face, pinned Bob Orton when ref Killer Kowalski kicked Orton's hands off the rope. Donnie Liable of Wrestling Eye magazine managed Perry Saturn and Orton as the Bug. Todd Gordon's Eastern Championship Wrestling on June 23 at the Philadelphia Original Sports Bar saw Super Destroyers beat Jimmy Jannetty and JT Smith, Nightbreed, Max Thrasher and Glenn Osborne, Over the Flames, Mr. Anthony and Rick Perez, and Destroyers beat Nightbreed to win the tag team tournament. Donnie Hotbody and Mr. Sandman and Peaches and Don E. Allen beat Larry Winters and Tony Stetson and Vivacious Veronica when Hotbody pinned Veronica after she was thrown into Sandman's surfboard. Don Morocco DDQ King Kala and Jim Neidhart pinned Salvatore Bellomo. This gave Neidhart 5 minutes with manager Stevie Wonderful, and Wonderful ran away, but Morocco, as a face, threw him back in. However, Morocco then turned on Neidhart. Wrestling Torch columnist Chris Savisa debuted in the ring as manager Gideon Wainwright, teaming with the Nightmares and losing to the Wild Bunch, Al Snow and Mike Kelly, and woman wrestler Taffy on June 19 in Lima, Ohio before 150 fans. WWF. Results from Superstars television taping June 29 in Glens Falls saw a tryout match with the debut of the Retriever, Roadblock, managed by the Genius and Ross Greenberg, neither of whom looked good. Mike Sharp was back as a jobber. Legion of Doom had Rocco with them, changed the name from Freckles as was obvious from this past weekend's interview. Well, at least the name is better for the character, but as for the idea, well, they've had better ones. Razor Ramon, Scott Hall, pinned Santana in a dark match. Natural Disasters beat Money Incorporated with the same walkout finna. Undertaker pinned Skinner. Local indie wrestler Iron Horse Perry Saturn worked as Peter Watts, check out that last name, a payback for the macabre cartoon remarks, and did a job for Tatanka. Phil Apollo did a job for Shawn Michaels. Legion of Doom and Paul Ellering beat Beverly Brothers and Genius when Hawk pinned Bo after the rocket launcher. The major angle of the taping saw Ultimate Warrior and Randy Savage doing an interview, both as faces. Ric Flair and Mr. Perfect then come out and challenge the winner of the SummerSlam match, with Flair saying, "I've been beating people who paint their faces for my entire career." Savage attacks Flair and Perfect but gets double-teamed, and Warrior makes the save, but Savage shoves Warrior, saying he didn't want any help, and the agents get in between them. I guess that pretty much decides who is going to win that match, because there is no way after this summer that they are going to spend the fall with Savage versus Flair matches. Undertaker pins Repo Man, sub for Berserker who missed a few shots over the weekend. Don't know reason yet, with the Tombstone Warrior pinned Papa Shango, and Savage beat Flair via DQ when Flair used the gimmick to get the pin, but after the match the ref sees it and reverses his decision. Crush also missed television and the weekend dates and was replaced by Where. Roddy Piper negotiating for an HBO television series. Can you believe Jane Fonda was on Body Stars this past weekend? Jane probably didn't even know it. Vince McMahon couldn't help but get his digs in with he and Perfect talking about how Kamala and Jane Fonda could do a Tarzan and Jane movie, and McMahon said that Ted Turner could play Kim Chi. That line was right up there with the line about Virgil being a perfect example of drug-free competition. June 28 in Newmarket, ONT saw Virgil beat Brooklyn Brawler, Legion of Doom Hawk pinned Nasty Boy Sags, Kamala pinned Kerry Von Erich, Rick Martel beat Tatanka via countout, Coco or pinned Skinner, Undertaker beat Kamala and Mr. Fuji in a handicap match, Berserker no-showed, and Savage pinned Flair. June 22 in Louisville, Drew 2600 as Tito Santana pinned Skinner, Legion of Doom Animal pinned Blake Beverly, Martel beat Tatanka via countout, Undertaker pinned Berserker, Crush pinned Kato, Nasty Boys beat High Energy and Savage pinned Flair. June 22 in Providence, Drew 4000 as Virgil beat Brawler, Von Erich beat Nails via DQ, British Bulldog pinned Repo Man, Disasters beat Money Incorporated via countout, Bret Hart pinned Michaels and Warrior pinned Shango. June 28 at the Capitol Center in Landover, Maryland, Drew 2800 as Santana pinned Kato, Nails beat Brunzel, Bulldog pinned Repo Man, Mountie beat Sergeant Slaughter via DQ, Money Incorporated pinned Disasters when IRS hit Typhoon with a briefcase, Bret Hart pinned Michaels and Warrior pinned Shang. June 25 in Oklahoma City, Drew 2000 as Santana pinned Kato, Nails beat Brunzel, Mountie beat Slaughter via DQ, Bret Hart pinned Michaels, Bulldog pinned Repo Man, Disasters beat Money Incorporated via walkout and Warrior pinned Shango. June 19 in Pittsburgh, Drew 3500 as Santana pinned Skinner, Legion of Doom Animal pinned Blake Beverly, Martel beat Tatanka via countout, Warrior pinned Shango, Crush beat Kato, High Energy beat Nasty Boys via DQ and Bret Hart pinned Michaels. June 26 in Montreal, Drew 2800, smallest house in years, as Virgil pinned Brawler 1/2 of 1 star. Where pinned Skinner 1 star. Kamala pinned Von Erich -1 star. Martel beat Tatanka via countout 1 1/2 star. Legion of Doom Hawk pinned Nasty Boy Sags 1/2 of 1 star. Undertaker pinned Berserker 1 star and Savage beat Flair via DQ in 1833 stars. Best match in Montreal in years because of Flair. June 15 in San Bernardino drew 3,100 as Von Erich pinned Kato, Nasty Boys beat High Energy, Crush beat Skinner, Mountie beat Slaughter via countout, Legion of Doom beat Beverly Brothers via DQ, Warrior pinned Shango and Bret Hart pinned Michaels. Former WWF wrestler Paul Roma was interviewed in John Clark's Wrestling Flyer newsletter. Roma talked openly about sexual harassment in the dressing room, saying Jim Powers had told him a sexual advancement was his reason for quitting and said he and Powers were originally put together to keep Powers' mouth shut. When Clark asked Roma if he was ever approached in a sexual manner, he talked about an incident happening in the home of one of the higher-ups but said it only happened once and he turned it down, and it was never brought up again. Roma claimed he and Hercules would have been tag champs if he had accepted the offer,